Welcome to another episode of We Are Carbon. I'm Helen Fisher and I'm joined by John Roulac, founder of the health food brand Nativa and executive producer of the film Kiss the Ground. There's so many nuggets of wisdom in this one that it's difficult to pick a highlight. From mob grazing to seaweed straws and a follow-up to Kiss the Ground, this conversation is tied together through John's active involvement in a vast range of regenerative initiatives around the globe. An investor and key player in highly successful companies, John has also been driven by an ecological awareness to discover practical solutions to our environmental challenges, and as such has founded 6 non-profits through his career. This was a fantastic opportunity, therefore, to tap into a valuable point of view around why it can be such a challenge for large-scale investment to be directed into regenerative solutions. Is a dying planet enough of a motivation to innovate our financial climate? And are so-called green technologies always what they're cracked up to be? We learn about some really impactful projects too, offering healing for people and the environment through the simplicity of allowing nature to take the lead. New episodes of the podcast are added every other Tuesday, and they're available in both video and audio-only formats. Find them on YouTube and your favourite podcasting platform, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date. Right, let's get stuck in. So welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. I wonder if you could kick us off by just giving a short introduction to yourself and maybe some of your work.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for inviting me on to the show today. Yeah. My name's John Roulac. I live in Washington State in the west coast of the United States. I've been a longtime advocate of, living better on the planet in terms of how we deal with our resources. When I was 21, they dumped nuclear waste by an unidentified truck driver 9 miles from my house, and that really kind of set me off, and was frustrated that they could just dump nuclear waste and get away with that. And that really set me on my life journey to learn more how the world works in terms of how we grow our food, or how we deal with our trash, or how our healthcare system is. And I went on to some of the things I've done. I helped pioneer home compost in the United States and wrote a book called Backyard Composting. And that was a fun effort. Taught 25,000 people to compost at our workshops, and then ended up starting an organic food company called Nativa, which means the nut of cannabis sativa. And we were 7 years in a row fastest growing company in the United States. And pioneered coconut oil, hemp seed, chia seeds, different foods that have been used for a long time before but have been kind of forgotten. And I stepped down as CEO from that, helped create a film called Kiss the Ground, which is a Netflix blockbuster film starring Woody Harrelson, all about regenerative agriculture and taking care of nature. And done a few other projects along the way, but I won't bore everybody with all the detail. But I'm currently involved in an agroforestry project in the global south called Agroforestry Regeneration Communities, and we can talk about that a little more later.
Yeah, fantastic. It's so wonderful that this is such a interestingly diverse range of businesses and experiences that you've kind of gone through over the years, and yet there seems to be this thread that comes from this very eye-opening experience when you were young with the nuclear waste and this impact that had on the environment. And I suppose everything that you are working through really connects back to nature and looking after nature in all that you're doing, which is really very much the point, I suppose, of why we're here today. There are so many fear-based stories that we hear about climate change. and we can struggle to get away from those sometimes. But there are also such a significant number of solutions, and particularly nature-based solutions, when we can work with nature and work more in harmony with nature to balance things back out. And this, as you've just mentioned, agroforestry regeneration communities, this is one of the initiatives, one of the projects that you're involved with right now. And I've been really taken back just at how fast and impactful that you've sort of gone from concept to on the ground action with this business. And it would be fantastic if you could share more about ARC and what you're doing with that.
Sure, glad to. And first, I find now as someone who's a bit older, been doing this for over 40 years, I kind of chuckle a little about this concept called nature-based. So, if you would tell indigenous people that we should consider nature-based, they would go
Crazy.
like, what are you talking about? Nature-based, like to consider nature as part of a solution. Like, we're so far away, so disconnected from nature, and it's like, and we really have to go back to the root. The people who lived in Europe 2,000 years ago were the Celtic people. They were an indigenous tribal people that were very connected to nature. And unfortunately, their way of living and their philosophy was uprooted by the Roman Empire, and then later religious and economic and kind of ruling forces. There's what's that film with Russell Crowe, with the Rome, it's like during the change of Caesar.
Like gladiators or gladiator.
Yeah. And so we've kind of forgotten our roots. I find it also interesting, a lot of people, a lot of different cultures are trying to tap back into their roots. Whether they're Native Americans or people going back to Africa and discovering that. But there is some interest in that for people to discover the European roots of our connection with nature. So this is what our great grandmothers were already knew about this. So we're trying to rediscover it again. Whatever is old is new, and new is old. So it's so agroforestry regeneration community. So how it kind of came to be was I transferred some of my Nativa shares into my own kind of a fund. They call it the Regen Fund, and I support projects around the world that I'm inspired. One project I put in a basketball court in an urban area in the middle of the country in North St. Louis. There's no basketball courts for the kids to play, so I like to play basketball. So I heard about that project, supported that, and then I was supporting some individual permaculture and agroforestry projects, one in Guatemala and one in Malawi. And they both were just getting going, and I just noticed that they were getting such good results. They would just show up, work with farmers, train them, provide them some trees and planting materials, and a year and a half later, they have a whole food forest and a food system, and things were better. They were sequestering carbon, better nutrition, better food security, better income. And I said, this is phenomenal. Instead of me just supporting a couple of these, why don't we build an organization, kind of a vehicle? So that's how agroforestry regeneration communities came about. And then we started supporting them more and took on other projects. And since then, we've helped build out over 5,000 food forests, train over 5,500 farmers, and we work specifically in the global south right now in Guatemala and in Malawi. Our Guatemala project's expanding to Honduras. We also work in Uganda and Tanzania and Kenya. And one of the programs in Malawi, we've trained 1,200 farmers, and our model is we put people come through like a 5-day training program, learning permaculture, learning how to make compost, learning how to conserve water and do intercropping and things. And then the farmer agrees to train 9 others. So when we put 50 people through a training, then we end up getting 500 farmers out of that.
Fantastic.
And one of the projects that we're doing, that I discovered a really interesting Irish aid worker who declared that he was living on an island of 4,000 people in Malawi from Ireland. And so he's in this remote island, and he said wants to meet some of these goals of sustainability and health. And it was very like he's just like living in a little tent, and the community's welcomed him. So he's invited us in, and when we invited 2 of their people, and they traveled. Many of them had never been away from their island, except for maybe once to a village across the way. So they had to take a bus 5 or 6 hours around a strange group of people. So we're going to put 4 nurseries on this island, and we're going to help train them in agroforestry and food production. We're also going to help some of them do beekeeping. And then someone was there, and that specializes in solar energy and irrigation systems. So it's surrounded by the second biggest lake, and so we're going to work with them. So that's kind of exciting. And one of the challenges, they're cutting down a lot of the trees.
Yes.
To make charcoal, because that's the second income. So we're working to see if we can provide some better jobs through some of this agroforestry, and they can also create fast-growing trees to make firewood instead of chopping down trees. And there's leopards and monkeys on this island, and we're trying to create a little ecotourism. Not like it's going to be a huge thing, but so that's one of the things that we're working there. And then in Guatemala, working with the Mayan people there, that's been growing really fast. We've gotten support from 1 tree planted, and that's been really good to get more food for us. And a lot of these people are really forgotten about. They're they don't have their floors are made out of dirt, poor nutrition. And whether they're in Malawi or whether in Guatemala, all they eat is pretty much is corn. And it's been even eroded. They're not even getting the full kernel. It goes to milling, et cetera, some cases, and then remove some of the nutrition. And this is so simple to do. So in taking somebody from doing just corn, and they're using chemical fertilizers, to saying you could also, one of the things we do is we'll plant trees every 5 meters. So now they don't need to use chemical fertilizers. We make our own fertilizers by nature-based. But I was just listening to somebody on one of these media, and they were talking about the World Bank and saying, what are we going to do about food insecurity? We need more chemical fertilizers. And like the leadership at the global level is it's so disconnected. And just here's a little organization. Literally, if we had $10 million, we could transform Malawi and Guatemala, where we could probably get close to 10% of their farmers to do food for us. So yeah, but there's definitely a disconnect. People are just not aware. So the idea is to show a model, show something that works, and farmers and love it. And we just recently did a video on it that's on our website to kind of capture that about that. So, they're very thankful, and they have less attachment to how to farm versus farmers in Britain or farmers in America, because they went to college and they think they understand this or that, and they look down on the farmers who are like encouraging more weeds to grow and bringing cattle into their farmlands or stuff. Whereas where there's a little more opening, because the people we work with, they're one harvest away from starving to death.
And that's the big difference that I think is so difficult to to really get into the mind of, if you haven't put any thought onto it previously. We're so used to going to the shop, buying that food, and then we see the prices rising and we see the concerns about fertilizer prices. And like you say, this seems to be, one side of the story where we're hearing from the sort of more our cultures that are used to chemical farming and used to food on the shelf. We hear of this panic about rising prices, but to the people you're working with, well, what a different story that is. It's not a few pence added on the pricing on the shelf. It's literally starvation, or a meal away from being able to put food in their children's tummies. And it's such a different motivation. And like you said, detachment. It really is just this word, detachment. It kind of encompasses everything.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this may sound a little harsh, but I think Americans and British and Germans are 10 to 15 harvests from starvation.
Yeah, so that also is shocking.
It's coming down the pike, and you're going to start seeing that because we're getting freak storms.
Yeah.
All sorts of massive amounts of rain and then no rain. But there's also, though, farmers and ranchers doing amazing things. All across Europe and America. There's one farmer named Rick Clark, and he was a conventional farmer. He has like 6,000 acres of corn and soybeans in Indiana, and he doesn't use a drop of herbicides, a drop of synthetic fertilizers, and he's very innovative. And he also doesn't till the soil.
Fantastic, yeah.
But so I recently heard him speak. So there's lots of good solutions, but we need to encourage and support farmers. But instead, I find that we want to do this whole thing about counting carbon and keep this whole infrastructure when we could just pay if you just paid farmers $80 or $100 an acre, and as you would say over in Europe, 220 220 a hectare, or would be 40 a hectare, and translated to pounds, which is crashing, and the euro is crashing. That's very simple. If you just keep the ground covered, and that's a key thing in regenerative agriculture, just keep the ground covered. If you drive around most places in farming in the wintertime, the soil is bare.
Yes.
And all that organic matter is blowing away. So literally, if the other thing, if you notice, if you go to a forest, do you see the bears spreading chemical fertilizers? How is a forest how is it like so vibrant? How is there all these species? Why are there different species and berries and ferns and all these things growing? Are we irrigating those trees?
Absolutely. It's just a complete self-caring system.
Yeah. And so they say if you go and take a shovel of the soil from the forest, and then you take a shovel from the field, and you compare the nutrition, it's so different. And so we have the opportunity to observe nature and learn from nature, and that's what some of these best farmers and ranchers. I'll give you another example around grazing animals. So there's a very famous well-known British writer named George Monbiot, and he has this amazing high-tech idea that we should get rid of all animals, that animals are the problem in agriculture. We don't need to farm. Stop. We're gonna grow food in a Soylent Green vats, giant vats with huge amounts of steel. And it's like, and people believe that, and this is what's being presented at the United Nations and the upcoming Egyptian, COP27. It's a new thing. We're just going to ferment our food and make this with GMOs. If you look at the job description, the amount of scientists and geneticists that you need in that operation. And there's all this leftover waste product, and you need 500,000 times more brewing capacity and fermentation capacity we have today. The amount of steel that's going to take, it's going to be giant football fields all over the countryside to be able to grow these things. And do people even want this? And the irony is that this is this human techno utopia society that Tesla and Bill Gates is like this shiny new object that we're like led down this pathway. And then let's just switch off that for a moment, and then let's look what people are doing that's our simple solutions. So there's a man named Alejandro Carrillo. He was visiting my house recently, and he lives in northern Mexico from the Chihuahua Desert. And when he was when he was ready to go to college, his dad was a rancher, and he said, "Well, what should I study in school? Should I study agriculture?" He says, "No." And then he ended up becoming a chemical computer engineer.
Okay.
So computer engineer, great career. Then his dad called him up. "We need help." So he went back to this ranch, 25,000 acres. The soil, the grasses were disappearing. The cows were eroding the soils. And so he started observing, and he found a way called holistic range management and mob grazing. And now after about 7 or 8 years, they went from 250 cows to like 700 cows, and they don't have to bring any hay. So essentially, he's restored the land just using cows and fencing. But what he does, he bunches them all together up really tightly for one day.
Okay.
And then all the manure and all the urine from the cow, and the cow's stepping on that, and then they eat the grass down about a third or a half, and then they never come back for 12 months. And now the grass is growing higher and higher. His goal is to have the grass so high that you won't be able to see cows. In fact, they've restored it so well, and he has now 4 other ranchers all around, that other ranchers from distant areas are upset that they're, quote, stealing the rain, because they're restoring the water system. So we could do that in Scotland and England. You could restore all these grasslands. And there's a movement called, rewilding, which can in a way be partnered with this, but in some cases it's opposing enemies. In some cases, the rewilding, the farmers and ranchers, but really it's about restoring ecology. And that's bringing humans and nature into the discussion. But sadly, we have these very wealthy people who are going, like, Europeans that are going to Africa, and they're forcing the Maasai off their lands and put up fencing and parks and killing them.
Wow.
And so, and it's a sad thing. And this is something that we described in the film Kiss the Ground. It's a simple concept, but as I remember, as one Aleutian native elder from Greenland told me, he says, the greatest distance in the world is between mankind's heart and our brain.
Yes, that sounds like an incredibly wise comment. And it does underline everything. I mean, you've just described quite a variety of scenarios where humans are sort of managing land in ways that are both restoring it and providing everything that we need. The cows are healing the land itself, and the people in Malawi using simple techniques to provide nutrition that they couldn't have dreamed of without these food forests. And when we sort of look at it from this point of view, and you must kind of feel this way, where there's a sense of frustration in how easy those solutions are, and how this detachment is becoming so apparent. Like these steel fermenting chambers, this idea that we're going to use those to replace animals, get rid of the animals, we use these fermenting chambers to make food, and it feels like there should be some principle that at some point we've learnt that we've got to integrate back into nature, and we've got to work with nature. We've got enough history that's taught us that. We can't design a technology that takes into account everything that nature is already wise to. We can't better nature, but we can certainly live alongside. And I think everything you've outlined there does just sort of have this very stark, this is the mind and this is the heart. So the saying there is very fitting indeed.
Yeah, one thing was there's a post that from the Savory Institute that I just shared on my LinkedIn page, and it shows two soil blocks. The one on the left is from a mob grazing animal grazing system, and the soil is very dark and rich and high in organic matter and high in carbon and all the things that create diversity and ecology. And then the one on the right is from a grain system where they've been growing grains that would be growing for these steel cow systems that they want to design. And it's much lighter in color and devoid of nutrition and devoid of biodiversity. And so the idea is this industrial vat system, the chemical system, it runs on yesterday's sunlight, petrochemicals. And the regenerative system runs on today's sunlight. Which one's more renewable, today's sunlight or yesterday's sunlight from petrochemicals? And the irony is, every major environmental group wants to run on yesterday's sunlight when it comes to our food system, because they are the asleep woke that have used cows to demonize, and they're demonizing farmers and ranchers, and we need to work with farmers and ranchers. And I have to say, 10 years ago, I was a very harsh critic of chemical agriculture and farmers. And I realized, though, we have to work with them where they're at today. And so, many of my organic purist friends don't like me because of that anymore.
Okay.
I feel we can get great results if we work with farmers and ranchers that can cut their chemical use by 50 or 60 or 70% in a few years, and then they're on a transition to organic, and more biological approach. I'll share a story. I ran into someone recently at an event, and he was a former pesticide applicator as a younger man, and now he just works with farmers and ranchers, helping them, transition to a more regenerative, healthy soil. And he works with like some large walnut growers, and they weren't the organic types, they're more conservative. They were just like weren't into that. But they called him up one day and they said, well, could I like switch our system to organic? And then the consultant friend, he thought about it and he said, well, everything you've been doing, we've transitioned you off. You haven't used any pesticides and you're not using any synthetic fertilizers. And said, you can do that. And the person ended up getting organic, and he says, I'm getting 40 cents more a pound. This is great.
Fantastic.
I wasn't thinking about being organic, there's so many, so many good options. And it's a way our society, like you're saying about frustrating, and it's a way we've created like this nightmare of dependence on chemical fertilizer. And it came about basically from war.
Yeah.
Chemical agriculture is basically following the footsteps of the war in Europe, where we had planes and dropped bombs from bomb factories. And after World War II, when the British and the French and the Americans came back from the war, what did we have lots of? Plane factories, bomb factories, chemical factories. And so we just switched. So instead of dropping bombs on against the quote enemy of people, we now drop bombs on nature.
Yeah.
And nature is the new enemy. And humans, well, it'll be okay. It's productivity. And um, and so the idea is that people know the emperor has no clothes, but if you want to, I just looked at the lineup at the United Nations Food Day in Egypt.
Yeah.
Every one of the groups are all promoting this dysfunctional old system, and they're not really, they're like, it's in Egypt. Would they think about inviting indigenous people in Africa who are part of the solution? They might invite a token, but they
Mm.
don't, because they or myself will speak of that the emperor has no clothes, that we don't need to use so many chemicals.
Yeah.
We can transition, but they won't do that because the United Nations has partnered with Crop Life, Monsanto and Bayer and DuPont. And so when they have and you don't even see them on the agenda, but when they have the cocktail parties at these events, they're there. And they're weaving, they're appointing who gets to speak and who doesn't. And this is like a high level sophistication,
Mm.
you know. And I'm not just like some, like, just, wild environmentalist. I've sold $1 billion of organic food. I have friends who are billionaires, so I know people who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, who, we do business together, and many of them are working to change the system. But the system is so entrenched in this old way. But I think the crisis that we're facing is like now, right, literally in our face. The
Absolutely.
question is, what do we do? How do we shift that?
Yes, yeah, because really everything that it is coming down to is, are we prepared to put the solution that is available to us to one side, for the sense of it's better for business to keep using the chemicals or to use the fertilizers, and it's a very difficult issue. Like you said earlier about with people in America and people in England, they're very thoroughly educated before they become a farmer, and they've become very identified with that knowledge and that practice, that it's harder for them to make the changes than the people in Malawi, that you're finding are more open-minded and ready to change. And I wonder if that is the same sort of blown out with regards to the way that business in general is just functioning, that we're just very set in our ways, and that this is how things are done. I do find that you've got a very interesting point of view with you. Like you say, you've got this experience with really very big companies and the success and the necessity of how they run. Then you've worked and moved money into ARC so that there are funding in place to support this kind of, like, you've, I suppose, had to choose heart over head. But is that genuinely from the heart the only way to fund and move money into the business of regeneration? Or can it be a sort of win-win for business and the planet at the same time?
Yeah. uh, I believe it can be a win-win. There's there now, but it's more complicated. It's much simpler for the power structure, for people like Michael Bloomberg or Bill Gates to go, let's let's shift from burning coal to doing windmills and solar and EVs. We can float those companies in the public stock market, and it's just shifting one asset to another asset class. You know, I listen to Bloomberg, and follow, because I also invest, and I'm kind of part of the system, but more of an outlier. Um, but the challenge with the food system is, there's food is bigger than the internet,
Mm.
business wise. And the incumbent system is based on extraction.
Yeah.
This emerging system is based on regeneration. And what that means is, we have to change everything. It means changing how we grow food to to what's being fed to the kids in school, to being what's served in the airlines, to what's in the supermarket. And they say, well, that's too expensive. But how expensive is a dead planet? How expensive is cancer? So it's a challenge. Many of my friends who've been involved in this a long time think that there has to be kind of a hit the wall moment. We kind of and maybe we can slow the speed of the vehicle approaching, it, and we can kind of wake up before we just drive off the cliff. But in 50 years, we've reduced 75% of all the winged insects in the world. The bees, the butterflies, and we're losing 1 to 2% a year. And the number one reason is chemicals, synthetic chemicals. And birds, we've lost 70% of all birds in the same time frame. What do birds eat? A lot of insects. So we've lost 50 to 60% of the plankton in our oceans, and we're losing 1 to 2% a year. They said in certain parts in the Atlantic, 90% is gone. The good thing is the good news though is nature is very resilient, and so we have that opportunity to do that. It's more windmills and more solar is not the solution. And we've seen in Europe through the Russian war that Europe, the kind of the intelligentsia pushed this concept that we could they were going to be green energy. And then at the same time, they're just buying all the oil and gas from Russia. And they say they're pushing their green economy, and you would think they would have been farther ahead. And now, and we put all of our bet on green energy, and we can't even power economies now. We can't do it this year. We can't do it next year. We can't do it in 3 years from now. And we've diverted all that trillions of dollars that we've put in there, and we've gotten very little out of it. In fact, there's a recent article showing the amount of minerals required to do solar and wind and EVs is we need several planets. You're gonna have to maybe go out into the asteroids and get minerals, or maybe they're going to dig into the oceans. I mean, we have 1/5 the amount of copper that we need, and these copper mines take 7 to 14 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you're looking to invest somewhere in a crazy financial world, copper is a good investment right now. Need a lot of copper for green energy. Not that we shouldn't be doing green energy, but we need to reduce our environmental footprint. I mean, why isn't, I would think Europe would be pushing more, insulation and more energy efficiency and turn lights off. I don't know. Are they talking about reducing energy usage a lot? Is that
It's not something that very little. It seems to be, yeah.
Yeah. There was a gentleman that was one of the brightest people that I've met named Amory Lovins. He was an American. He founded the Rocky Mountain Institute. He had a whole system. He said he was going to propose, we're going to, just like you can trade pork bellies and wheat futures, we were going to trade negawatts, not megawatts of power, negawatts. So any business organization that could find a way to conserve energy could sell it on the market, and you could go into an old manufacturing facility, and you can readjust where the piping is and the boilers and systems, and you could save massive amounts of energy.
Yeah. But
very little's done. I mean, they do a little now and then with some new facilities, but those are just examples. So we got to kind of think out of the box. But what, as individuals, is just we can learn to compost. We can grow a little more of our own food. We can support local farmers, and also just don't believe what they tell you on the telly.
Yeah, it's a challenging one. That
I thought that's like, I remember when we grew up in the 70s and 80s, don't believe what's on TV. And yet the funny thing is, I find many of my my so-called liberal and progressive friends today, they believe everything that the talking heads tell them. Everything.
It's a bit scary. Yeah.
Like, really? I mean, just the concept of natural immunity would get you banned in social media. Just saying that, improve our immunity to fight off disease.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like we've
Vitamin D,
yeah.
like that's a scary thing to even discuss, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's but the potential, there's a lot of things that we can do and a lot of things that need to change, and sometimes maybe out of crisis will come more reflection, right?
Yes, I think that's always what we need to keep sort of moving the focus to the opportunities that crisis, that feeling of crisis is offering to us, and yeah, try to shift. It really is in so many ways about the mindset and about the approach to this. Everything that you've spoken about, it shows how it all ties together. The way that we fuel, the energy that we use, and the nutrition that we have in our bodies, and all of these different things, all can be bettered through regenerative practices. We can heal everything side by side.
I'm wearing a hat from Soil for Climate.
Oh, fantastic!
It's a Facebook group that talks a lot about the benefits of grazing animals to regenerate our soils. Remember, the vast majority of all lands that we have is pastures, is not suitable for growing crops.
Yeah.
And we can restore it, but it takes more time. It takes human focus, and so we need to work on that. Also, I wanted to mention the film Kiss the Ground that I did. People can watch it on Netflix. We're going to have a new film out that'll be out in about a year from now.
Fantastic. So
yeah, so people can learn about that as well. And the other thing that I think is really important is to focus on our personal health.
yes.
Because, like, health is wealth. A couple of things I want to just share a little about that. I really encourage people to do the plank. The yoga plank is something simple. You can do it every day. It takes like 30 seconds. And if you're a little out of shape, start, slow, even 10 or 15 seconds. And that really builds your core strength, and it helps overcome the fact that we're sitting all the time so much,
Yeah. So it's a very sedentary lifestyle.
Yeah. And also eating various types of mushrooms like lion's mane or oysters, mushrooms. They have a lot of very good nutrition, very good for anti-cancer, and they're even showing that because we've lost so much nutrition in the soils from chemical agriculture. I remember in 1938, the Secretary of Agriculture said America faced one of the greatest crises they have ever faced, that we've destroyed our soils, the minerals of the soils. That was 1938.
Wow.
But because we've lost of that, we want to get certain nutrients more, and different kind of foods. And mushrooms have a particular type of amino acid they're saying that fights against Alzheimer's. So trying to eat some different kind of mushrooms a couple times a month can be very effective. And I like to eat what I call a rainbow diet. So eat different types. Go to the farmer's market and buy vegetables that scare you. Chop it up and steam it up, or throw it in a salad. So that's important as well.
Yeah, because it is so overlooked, isn't it? The value of nutrition to our health and our vitality and how we go about our lives, I suppose. So yeah, very good advice. And regarding the production that you're doing at the moment, or the new, is this a follow-up from Kiss the Ground, or is it a completely different?
Yeah, it's a follow-up, and yeah, the filmmakers Josh and Rebecca Tickell, they're great, and they're working on this new film called Common Ground, and it's going to be a little more intense. Kiss the Ground was optimistic and hopeful, and even so, a lot of farmers had a hard time with it. Some of them were upset the first time they watched, and they watch it again. Then but I've had so many people tell me that they share the film, and people really get, instead of someone trying to explain what regenerative agriculture, they can just watch this. But this next film is going to be it's going to get a little closer in.
Okay.
Um, and uh, yeah, it's gonna be quite interesting. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the next cut of it in a couple months.
Yeah, I bet. I bet it's exciting.
Yeah, but we can sequester vast amounts of carbon. And the thing to understand is, if we said today you could wave a magic wand and we didn't emit one more hydrocarbon,
Yeah.
we are going to hit we are going to hit a huge crisis, even if we didn't do any more. So the most important thing right now is to really focus on sequestration, sequestering the carbon. Then we can pull all the legacy load. And remember, all that carbon that's in the atmosphere, where did it come from? Much of it, it just came from, it used to be in the soil, and we can bring it down. We can bring that down and put it back where it belongs. And in the process, we can have healthier food. We can bring back the small water cycle in areas where it's drought. We can bring back the rain like they did in Chihuahua Desert. We can create more biodiversity. We can have more healthy ecosystem for birds, insects, and animals. We can create the right livelihood for people to work there, and we can reduce our government deficits. We're spending all on health and sickness and in crisis, and start in your local community. And the other thing I would just like to say is I've had to learn that just because our brain says that we know something, maybe there's something else there. So even like in this crisis here, intellectually, I sometimes can go, gosh, we're so messed up as a species. Like literally, and then I also go, but also life is so magical. There's so many amazing things, just to watch, like to me, watching a hummingbird, come and get nectar from my garden, or sit in the sun, or enjoy some fresh organic blueberries. These things are miraculous, and maybe there's something else that's going on. Maybe Elon Musk is right. Maybe it's a virtual simulation that we're playing. We're all just experiencing this chaotic chaos of breakdown, and it's like maybe a test of what do we do? Do we ignore it? Yeah. Do we just go with the dominant paradigm that basically plan is to get rid of nature and replace it with some bizarre, meta transhuman reality? Or do we come back to the garden, come back to what our great grandmothers and grandfathers knew intuitively long time ago?
Yes.
They didn't have Google.
And I think there's something about that you've just stated that really I feel that just to add to it is we have the choice. Like, what does the magic feel like? Does the techno variant, does that feel more magical than the variant where you can enjoy the biodiversity and you can enjoy the hummingbird that's sitting on the plant and just go into some kind of peaceful moments of reflection watching that, which is magical to you? And I think that there's a time now where we kind of at this tipping point where it's more a question of, well, what do you want the world to look like? Which direction would each of us choose? And I think that, as you said, community and getting involved with the idea of where your food comes from, these are all very integral sort of choices that we can take to just those little steps along the way of moving towards which one suits us the best.
And technology can be helpful. It's what we're using to communicate right here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we're going to be installing a solar pump to draw water from the lake and things. So it's not like we have to throw it all away, but can we have a lens of discernment?
Yes.
and what's appropriate and what's too much. So um, yeah, so definitely, it's going to be an interesting coming decade.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, one more thing, if I could just squeeze it in quickly. I know that you're doing some work around ocean reforestation, and I'd sort of love to get a little insight on that and why that is particularly significant.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna show you something. I'm be back in 1 second.
Okay.
See if you can see that.
I can indeed.
And this is a straw made of seaweed.
Oh, how fantastic.
And after you use it, it can degrade and compost. Yeah. And so this is made from kelp by a company called Lollyware. And so there's a big movement in the West Coast in California and the United States and in Canada to reforest the oceans with kelp and sea plants. And we can use it for fertilizer to restore the land. We can use it to make plastics and other food and nutrition. And so there's a lot of interesting, and essentially it's a circular system. It's some of these crops grow 2 feet a day.
Wow.
And we can just you just trim them, and then they grow back more, and then you trim them and they grow back more. So we got there was a $10 million grant from the Department of Energy, and so they're assessing where we can grow these the best places. And you have to deal with the storms and all sorts of things. But we need to help the current declining wild kelp and other planktons and sea plants, and then seaweeds, and then also do some through the farming system, so we can reforest that. It's kind of a combination. So yeah, a lot of interesting, and it's the kelp has complete mineralization, so a lot of minerals, so it's very good for the soil. And I'm actually right now working on a new project to create what I call regenerative plant food.
Okay, fantastic.
So, including from the ocean and other means, including we're looking at where they're growing. They're taking food scraps. I don't call them food waste, but food scraps, feeding them to like insects and mealworms, and then the byproduct of those is like skeletal structure, and the excrement is an excellent food fertilizer. So I'm working on some formulations to make that available as a retail product. So it's a challenging project. We'll see how it goes. I'm still in the early formulation phase of that. So I'm always working on the new.
Yes, you sound very busy indeed. Yeah, but yeah, everything that is just helping to move us away from that need for extracted fossil fuels and towards being circular. And it does seem that there's a heck of a lot that you're getting on with. And thank you for everything that you do and everything that you share, because it's a really significant time, I think, as we've mentioned. And if there's anything else that you'd like to add before we finish.
Yeah. I like the Lao Tzu quote, Chinese philosopher, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Very profound.
We have a long journey ahead for regeneration, but we have to begin that step, versus just folding into the dominant paradigm of this false techno utopia that is being beamed into our homes and newspapers on a daily basis, and the future, seals of the ocean and whales and indigenous people, their future lies in our hands. So what the choices that we make will impact many. So let's make those right choices and begin the journey.
Fantastic, absolutely. And we'll pop some links, because I think it's always very, very key, like you've mentioned, to offer people the opportunity to watch Kiss the Ground. If they haven't already seen that movie is a fantastic way of sharing the conversation about regenerative agriculture and the significance of that to their friends and their family. So we'll pop that, and also any links that we've also sort of different bits and pieces that you've mentioned through the chat. So
Right, yeah, that'd be great. And also, people can follow me on my I have a Substack channel that's a blogging platform. People can follow some of my articles that I've written, yeah, including Making America's Rivers Blue Again, which is kind of my like thesis article on agriculture and the potential.
Sounds fantastic. We'll pop that link too. So thank you so much for sharing with us today and for all of your time. And have a fantastic day.
You too. Thank you for doing what you do.
And thank you for listening to this episode of We Are Carbon. New episodes are added every other Tuesday, so don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date. It's a huge help to the show if you'd like to add a thumbs up or a review on whichever platform you're listening on. And let's keep figuring this all out together.